Hello and welcome to the Health Detective Podcast by Functional Diagnostic Nutrition. We bring you interviews from people who have conquered the trickiest of health challenges using the Functional Diagnostic Nutrition philosophy and similar healing modalities. You're going to hear from experts who have been through the ringer with their health issues and yet managed to come out on the other side. You can always visit us at functionaldiagnosticnutrition.com, but for now, here is today's episode. All right, hello my friends, and welcome back to another episode of the Health Detective Podcast by Functional Diagnostic Nutrition. My name is Evan Transu, aka Detective Ev, and I will be your host for today's show, episode number 442 of the Health Detective Podcast. If you are a regular listener, we only have probably 2 more podcasts, maybe 3. In this setup, we are currently traveling right now. We're in between leases, and then we are heading down to the wonderful city of Austin, Texas, where we have this awesome new setup being built for myself and my wife so that she can do her stuff and I can do mine. I cannot wait to share this with you guys. This is okay, but it's like a green screen, and now that I'm looking, I'm like, wow, my corner over there is like folding in. So 442 episodes in, we should have a pretty darn good setup, and we have that coming soon. If you're on audio, you wouldn't even notice. 2 quick announcements, though, outside of that you do really need to pay attention to, even if you're not a regular listener. One is Hicks. As of right now, recording this on August 25th, 2025, there are still some tickets available. I have no idea the amount. I need to get the updated count this week, but I don't even know if there's any VIP left at all, but there's definitely some general attendance. Actually, if you guys, if you're watching live and you're able to message us really quick, like shoot me a message on Facebook or shoot at FDN Training a message on Instagram, please. Someone is trying to sell their ticket because they bought it super early and they're no longer able to make it. So I might be able to get you actually a really good discount on it. So either click the QR code above or scan it rather, or message us because I can probably hook you up with that person that's looking to sell their ticket. And that would still be a larger discounted rate than what we can give right now, because the current discount is Summer 30 for 30% off all tickets. That's all capital letters, Summer 30 at checkout for 30% off tickets. I hope to see you guys there, man. We got an awesome set of things going up. We have a meetup at Reed's happening on Thursday. We got the networking night happening on Thursday, 2 days of conferencing. I'm inviting as many people as I can, so I hope that you guys do the same. I got mom and dad there, and an uncle are coming. My wife's coming. We got a couple of friends coming. I did as much as I could. So hopefully you guys are bringing your friends and peeps that love functional healthcare as much as we do. Only other announcement that I have is someone that you guys probably know pretty well, Brendan Vermeyer. He's going to be our featured speaker for our Health Space Unmasked event in September. If you don't know what that is, I'll keep it very short. It's something we really only do about 10 times per year because we take off July and December. It's the first Saturday, though, of every month that we do. And that is going to be this time around on the gut-brain axis and targeting neuroinflammation specifically. So Brendan got into this space because of mental health-related stuff. And this guy just took it to the craziest level possible. I mean, not only does he understand how to help people from the functional side, but he can explain to even the most seasoned practitioners things and studies I don't think that they've heard of. So if you want to nerd out on the gut-brain axis, neuroinflammation, and its relationship to mental health and other conditions, it's a free event. Go to fdntraining.com/HSU, or you can scan this QR code and we'll get you there. That's fdntraining.com/HSU. Health Space Unmasked events are always free. They always last about 2 hours. And it's one of the only chances that the public has to come and hang out directly with Reed Davis, our founder. So even after, what is this now? 17 years of FDN being taught as a course, the guy is 72 years old and he still will get on with you on a Zoom meeting to go over HSU, and you can talk to him directly. I mean, it doesn't get much cooler than that. So check us out there, fdntraining.com/HSU. All right, now my announcements are done. Let's get to our guest today. So our guest, Mariana, is a functional diagnostic nutrition practitioner herself who helps ambitious women resolve exhaustion, iron deficiency, and hormonal chaos by uncovering their unique root causes. After years of being the overachieving caretaker who was always told her labs are normal, she hit burnout and knew something had to change. At the same time, being a caretaker showed her firsthand how disconnected our medical system is from true health building, where profits from what she calls disease care are often prioritized over creating thriving, healthy people. Today, she helps women step into self-leadership and take back the power that comes with being in control of their energy, well-being, and vitality so they can finally enjoy the life they've worked so hard to build. I love that bio, and welcome to the show, my friend.
Thank you so much, Evan. I'm excited to be here.
Awesome. So let's start with this because I want to get into the caretaker side of this too. I think that's going to be interesting. But you also have a personal health story, from my understanding. So I would like to know, when did those symptoms start and what did they look like at the time?
hmm Yeah, so actually, my caretaking story and my personal health, they're kind of woven in together. So I'll just kind of go through it,
Sure.
from the get go. So basically, I grew up around chronic illness. My mom got sick when I was a teenager. And, I won't go into the specifics of that out of respect for her and her privacy. But what that meant for me was that I was in and out of hospitals with her. I, grew up pretty fast. I developed a lot of anxiety and sort of hypervigilance. I now know that I was like deeply living in survival mode at the time, So I threw myself into what I could control. I threw myself into academics and into, work and career. I became an overachiever. I was also, the oldest daughter. So I took care of my brother. So just like a lot going on there right from the get-go. And I really developed this identity where like feeling safe was correlated with my output and like what I did for others, right? So fast forward to my 20s, I worked my way up in my career, but my anxiety was really crippling. So that was kind of like my first real like symptomology was anxiety, and also really terrible periods, like because my hormones were really out of whack. Um, I was also experiencing a lot of exhaustion. I was then diagnosed with anemia, and I was drinking quite a bit, which, didn't help. But looking back on it now, I really didn't have any sort of like healthy coping strategies at that point. And so every year I'd go for my annual checkup and I would come back with low iron. And I was just told to take iron pills. They were like, well, your iron's low, take iron pills. And, I've tried so many. I tried like every different form you could think of. And all that really gave me was like a lot of constipation, these sort of like heart murmurs and flutters that were deeply uncomfortable. Like they actually scared me. I thought I would have to go to the ER. I would get really bad headaches. My fatigue was worse. And I was just like way more tired and kind of like woozy, feeling a lot of like pressure in my head. And so I was like, this is no good. I just like wrote the iron pills off. I just accepted that I had low iron and I thought that I would just be tired for the rest of my life. So then in 2020, I landed this amazing job. I had dreamed about it for years. And on paper, it really looked like I had made it. I was like, I made my level of success. But again, that anxiety was like worse than it ever was before. And I just like, I could not handle it. So I decided to save up a bunch of money and I quit. And what I could describe from there was just like this feeling of full collapse, really. Like I was so exhausted. I had no motivation. I could not get out of bed. I just like, I felt like a shipwreck. I felt like I was like, I think I was like 30 at this point. And I was like, I feel so old. Like, I feel like I have nothing left in me to like live. And I would say that that was kind of the beginning of my journey into like FDN and sort of like a more like holistic health space. I started to get into herbalism. I was doing a lot of nervous system work, just really trying to feel better. So I was kind of, developing sort of coping strategies from there to like help mitigate those symptoms of anxiety. And then fast forward to 2023, I just turned 34. I got laid off and my mom landed in the hospital for 9 months. And she was in intensive care. And so, during that time, like when you kind of experience your life changing completely overnight, I was going to the hospital nearly every day. I was running on pure adrenaline and cortisol at that point. Like I now know that. And I was experiencing this reality of the medical system where the doctors weren't talking to one another. I would beg them to run tests. They wouldn't do it. I would spend nights Googling things and trying to piece things together on my own, like looking at PubMed and all that. And I just saw how they were separating the body into parts, really. And, there was kind of no regard for how different systems really interplay and interact with one another and influence one another. They would call in specialists that would take a look, and then like they would just look and be like, this is not my problem, and be on their way. And so it was really like this feeling of hopelessness. And that's around the time where my own symptoms really started to come to a head. Like I started struggling with my digestion in a way that I never had before. And, now knowing like the impact of stress on digestion, if you're in chronic fight or flight, like you are not resting, you are not digesting. So that made a lot of sense. I had a lot of emotional instability. My hair was falling out in clumps. Like I couldn't eat, I couldn't sleep. And I think when you hit a rock bottom like that and your life really crumbles, you're really faced with like, what am I going to make out of this crumble? What is this trying to teach me? What can I learn from this? Like, basically, where do I go from here? And that's ultimately also like what brought me to FDN, because through all of my Googling, through all of my researching, trying to understand how the body works, trying to understand how it heals, I found the, functional approach, and that really felt aligned with me. And so, I became determined to like understand how I could help myself feel better, help other people feel better, help my mom feel better, because these answers of like, we don't know why this is happening, or we don't know why you feel this way, it was just like wasn't good enough for me anymore. So I kind of wanted to put that all together. Yeah.
Okay, there's a lot to unpack here. So one
Yeah.
thing, and if you've listened before, I'm always curious about this side. So you mentioned in 2020, I think that's when you started looking into things like herbalism and stuff.
Mhm.
And I kind of find this funny. I mean this I hope people don't take this politically incorrect. I have no idea why, but women love plants, it seems. I feel like they are just way more aligned with that. There's plenty of men herbalists that we've had on, but if I give my wife any plant, she's like the happiest person in the world. I don't understand that. So I'm wondering, did you get into the herbalism? Yes, I know that you had some health symptoms, but was there just a general interest in that as well? Or was that truly from the holistic health standpoint? Because what I'm trying to figure out here is when like the major awakening happened, because you have this really serious issue with the caretaking side, and you're unfortunately going through the system, and that's how you're learning how messed
Yeah.
up it is and how broken it is. But I'm wondering if there was anything already in your mind from what you studied with herbalism, and those other functional things. So when you were doing the herbalism, was some of it just pure interest, or was it like, actually I'm trying to heal, that's why I've gotten into this subject?
It was a little bit of both. And I think, again, just being around kind of the general medical system and like seeing medications, right? I kind of gravitated towards this idea of like, the body is going to respond to things that are natural because they are, biologically, it can receive those things better as opposed to something that's synthetic. And I think there was also a lot of just interest in herbalism for me through like adaptogens and kind of like calming herbs and teas. And that's really where I kind of started with that.
Okay. Did you have any influence in your life prior to this that made you open to those things, or you'd always just someone who was kind of a little bit curious and willing to be open-minded about things? Because you even just said like some of it just seemed intuitive to you, where something natural should probably work better with the body. So did you just always kind of have that mindset, or did anyone in your life influence you to think a little bit more holistically?
No. Well, when 2020 rolled around and I was in that kind of career that I had, I mean, I was working 60-hour days. I was working every single weekend. Like I was just work, work, work. And then when I just like, I literally woke up one morning, I remember, and I had this voice. It was probably like intuitive. It was just like, if you keep going like this, you are going to get sick. Like there's no coming back from here. And so when I saved up all my money and I kind of quit, I was faced with this reality of like, I don't know who I am without my work. I don't have hobbies. I don't have passions. Like, I don't know what I'm interested in. And so that kind of, all I knew was that I wanted to feel better. Right. And so I just kind of naturally gravitated towards exploring that, really.
I can't tell if this is too early or not, but I feel like it's definitely worth exploring this podcast. I'm like, do I want to go there next? So I'm going to take half a second here, and then I'm going to figure out if that's where I want to go next. Because what we're going to do is congratulate our friend Sherry Roberts real quick. She just finished up graduating. She did her post-grad interview today, and then she's joining us for the podcast. So thanks, Sherry. Hopefully we have you up here very soon. We'd love to be able to chat with you. I definitely want to take the route of going more into the work side, because that sounds really big for you. I also think that this is something that is coming up a lot more for people. So it's probably worth diving into a little bit deeper. I mean, you just said something kind of profound. You had no idea who you even were without this work. But by the time that was happening, like you said, you've been here for 30 years at this point, right? It's not, and I'm about to turn 30. It's not like we're particularly old, but you think we'd been here long enough to kind of figure out who we were. So was it just in 2020 then that you were starting to identify that work was a way, yes, obviously to achieve things, but also to hide from other stuff? Or had you already kind of gotten wise to that in the years before? Like, I can't tell if it was just something that hit you like a truck in 2020 where you're like, wow, I've been using this almost as escapism in some way. Or was that something that you were kind of thinking about in the years prior to?
No, it definitely hit me like a truck. For sure. Yeah. And I think my kind of route to healing, what I like to think of as like healing from fatigue and burnout, if you will, was I really started with doing a lot of the inner work, a lot of the nervous system work, a lot of like trying to understand, who am I being? Like, who do I want to be? How am I operating on default, and how is that maybe not serving my energy? And so like, that's also kind of the way that I like to think about it in my work too. It's like, number one, what's happening in your life that's keeping you exhausted? You need to take inventory, get really clear what's really draining your energy, who might be draining your energy. Are you living in alignment or out of alignment? That's a huge stressor, and how can you work on those? And then through the functional lens, also understanding like what's happening in your body that's keeping you exhausted, like, biochemically, like in your physiology, where can we optimize function so that you have the stamina and the energy and the drive to create the life that you want. So I really see those working in synergy, and like, you can't really heal from exhaustion and fatigue like that without addressing both, in my opinion.
Yeah, you brought up, because this is the thing, your body will show up for you as long as it can. So you brought up the idea about like how your digestion gets super compromised if you're running on this fight or flight. And that's literally true. For those, I would assume many people on this show know this, but for those that don't, you can actually see in someone's body when they are in this adrenaline response, the body starts to send less energy to certain areas that we know are not going to kill you overnight. So I don't need to digest in the moment if a fight or flight situation is happening and I need to do something to save my life. The problem is, and what you're bringing up is, we're operating in this fight or flight so often, the body doesn't know the difference when it's in that state between there is a literal threat that could kill me right now versus I'm just scared that I'm going to tick off my boss today or something like that, or I'm not going to meet this deadline at work. So it compromises the digestion, which one time, not a big deal. Honestly, probably 20 times, it's not the worst deal in the world to have slightly compromised digestion. Maybe you just don't feel so good, or, you got to use the bathroom tomorrow or something like that. But when this happens for years on end to people, the body eventually has to say, we can't do this anymore. And I think this is something that also happens with these extremely long work hours. You don't necessarily have the option, if you're in the middle of like a meeting or a presentation or whatever it is that you were doing, to just be like, all right, see you guys, I'm going to stop. So the body keeps showing up, keeps pumping out those hormones so that you're able to do that 60 hours a week until there is nothing left in the tank. And now we can't ignore these things anymore. So all this to say, I wanted to circle back here. Since it did hit you like a truck, but it only happened once you quit, are there any warning signs now that you would give to the folks listening? Because I even have to check this myself. You said that I think you said beforehand that you've listened to some stuff before. I love what other people call working. I don't know that I call it work or do it just for the sake of working. That's just the word that's relatable. I find myself to be incredibly passionate about this stuff. I don't necessarily want to do anything else. So I find that my hobbies overlap with the work a lot, right? Because what I'm doing in my free time is, generally speaking, what I'm doing for a paycheck. So that's the only reason it would be a hobby versus work. But I need to check myself. So I'm asking for myself as well. But for those that are out there that are kind of, burning the candle at both ends and don't necessarily know if they're doing this for a reason of hiding something, is there any warning signs looking back that you would now tell people about?
That's a great question. I think it's so interesting how you bring up like it's a way to kind of hide from yourself, because I definitely, looking back on it now, do think that it was a bit of that for me. But there are certain like warning signs, just in terms of, I always bring it back to energy, because there were times, for example, like patterns that I was doing that were kind of keeping me stuck and making my fatigue worse and worse and worse, because I was, burning the candle at both ends, like you said. It's like, again, just like constantly pushing yourself to meet a deadline, pushing yourself to make something 100% perfect when, like, maybe this is like 50% effort is okay for this one, so that you're not like, just completely overextending yourself. When like I would feel the afternoon slump and I would just like grab, a triple espresso to like get through the rest of the day, like, yeah, that works in theory for a minute, but actually like you are just so depleted that it's like whipping your adrenals like to go faster. And it kind of creates more damage in the long run. Also, being on screens late at night, like I always wear blue light blockers just religiously for like the past 5 years, pretty much, because all of that, blue light is really detrimental to sleep. Sleep is when we rest, when we repair, when, we detoxify. So if your sleep is impaired, like you are going to be sluggish the next day. People pleasing, really like not having boundaries in place, like a lot of those sorts of things. They seem simple, but it's so often that we ignore those like biological signs that our body is trying to get us to rest, and it's going to force you to rest at a certain point if you don't allow yourself to rest. And it's going to force you to rest by making you really tired, like making you too tired to live your life.
Gotcha. Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. So guys, there's a balance, right? Because I think I do believe some of this probably is innate to our genetics or personality. And what I mean by that is, and maybe I shouldn't have worded it as hiding. So thanks for agreeing with me, but I thought that's what you were getting at, and maybe I was incorrect. But the people that are using work to, let's put it this way, they're using work to maybe solve a problem, right? And that problem maybe should have been solved a different way, let's say, or those problems, but we're going to do this through work or get some type of validation or whatever it might be. I think everyone has issues. Not everyone necessarily uses work in that way to deal with those issues. There's a million people that will not be kind of like 60-hour-a-week people, right? So I do think there's a genetic side and a personality side. So it's just balancing it, right? I've had to find this mix for myself where, okay, what is just natural Evan Transu? I'm a crazy person. I like to work all the time versus what is actually trying to be escapism. Maybe that's why I was using the word. Maybe because I've done that before. And I probably did do that from at least, I'd say 18 to 23, 24 in that range. Like a lot of it was, yes, that's who I am, but also it's a lot more comfortable just to be doing that than work on some of the stuff I needed to work on. You know what I mean?
Totally. Yeah. 100%. Yeah.
Okay. So you go through the FDN course eventually, and you had been at least studying online and doing some other things. Like, again, looking into the herbalism, I'm sure ending up on YouTube videos or some deep in some forum on Reddit, whatever, probably learning about this stuff to some degree. And then something comes across your screen or whatever that makes you want to do FDN. So of course I want to find out about what we discovered in your labs while you went through FDN. But even before that, I would imagine for someone that worked as hard as you to get where you got career-wise, it has to be almost a little bit tough to say, hey, I'm going to go pursue this whole new education. I don't know if you were thinking about it from the career side beforehand, but it can be really challenging when we put all this work into one thing and then we say we're going to go take this different route. So do you remember, like, what were the things that actually made you decide on pursuing FDN and saying, I'm going to take on this entire course?
Yeah. I mean, I was just really unhappy with what I was actually doing. It's like in my previous career, it's like I worked my way up, but I was just not fulfilled, and it was misaligned for me. And I think just naturally I gravitated towards FDN because I did come from like a really like work hard academic background, and like FDN does not mess around with that. I mean, getting through the practicals and the final exam, like that is a trip. And by the end of that time, you really integrate all of that knowledge. And that was really important to me because I think, yeah, I wanted in general just more alignment with what I was doing. And what I was naturally interested in was health building. And so I did a health coaching certification before FDN, actually. That was kind of like, so it was like herbalism, health coaching certification. But once I finished that certification, I actually didn't feel comfortable or confident in my ability to recommend things to people because I didn't know what was actually happening inside. And so that's when I discovered FDN and I looked at all of the things and saw that I would get my own labs. That was also like a big selling point for me because I wanted to know what was happening inside my body. That was kind of like what drew me to it and what got me started.
I love that. I had the exact same experience where I also went through a health coaching program.
Yeah.
I did enjoy mine. I got a lot from it, but
Same, yeah.
For someone who was as sick as I was, and it's, not feeling great as you were, it's like if you're going to work with people, and especially if you hold the standards that we do for ourselves, like I have to be able to explain this fully. And what happened with the health coaching a lot is like what I was recommending or suggesting would probably help 80% of people. But then I'd find these like 20% where the needle was not getting moved at all. And the fear around the person being the 20% led me to feeling like I had like this imposter syndrome and all this kind of stuff. And what's changed with FDN, it's not that I can get every single person I've ever worked with to the exact same level. It's not some miracle system there. I don't think that exists yet, but there is no one that I can run the foundational labs with. I don't care how healthy they think they are. If I run the foundational labs with them, there is going to be something that we find for them to work on. Usually it's a large handful of things that we find that we can work on. And that gives me that confidence to take on pretty much any client, with the exception of, extremely, extremely sick people that just need Western care at this point. I have so much confidence that we can help them. So when you were going through the course, for those that don't know, you get labs included in the cost of tuition. You're actually basically required to be your first client. What better way to be able to talk about this than to actually walk the walk? So to the degree that you want to share, and to the degree that you remember the little stuff that came up, I'd love to know what were some of the major findings or standout findings on the labs for you that you ran while going through FDN.
I love this question because what I experienced when I got my labs back was just like a complete like validation of how my lived experience was manifesting in my body. So, I had spent years prioritizing everyone and everything else besides myself, right? And so I saw the data of how I was just like operating and living from complete depletion, really. Like I was low on everything. So I had low cortisol, I had low sex hormones, low SIGA, low stomach acid, low digestive enzymes, low good gut flora, which later manifested in H. pylori because I reran my GI map, poor bile flow. So I was just low on everything. I also uncovered leaky gut, which was actually like a really big light bulb moment for me. Like I didn't even really think, like again, like I hadn't had digestive issues up until very recently, so I didn't think that that was going to be a problem for me. But if we think about, the intestinal lining and the mucosal barrier as this protective boundary, right, between what you ingest from the outside world and your internal environment, when it's leaky or damaged, it leaves you very vulnerable to pathogens, viruses, bacteria, toxins. All of those things are going to bog down your system. So not only did I feel like my nervous system was always being infiltrated because I didn't have good boundaries, that was being reflected in my body as well. What else? I had sensitivities to gluten and dairy. And here I was eating, sprouted bread and cottage cheese and, Greek yogurt every day, thinking like I'm being so healthy. But it was just causing a lot of inflammation and kind of like really revving up the stress response in my body. And I was also a fast oxidizer. So that meant that my body, combusts food for energy really quickly. And so being a vegetarian was definitely not helping that because, carbs are fast burning fuel. So if you are burning fuel fast and all you give your body is fast burning fuel, you're constantly going to feel like you're running on empty. You're constantly going to be, hungry. Your energy is going to be dipping all the time. And that was definitely my reality. So it was really just like the whole picture was like, wow, this is why I feel the way that I do.
How long had you been doing the vegetarian thing for? Was that because of health coaching or did that precede that?
It preceded that actually. And again, like here's the thing, and my philosophy on food is like, I don't believe that there is one diet that's good for everybody. I don't believe that there is one way of eating that is better. I was eating vegetarian because I thought that was healthier and I thought that was better for the environment. But it wasn't what was good for my physiology, just for my unique biochemistry. So yeah, I was only vegetarian for, I would say, probably about 3 years. And actually looking back on it now, as soon as I started eating meat, like I dropped 5 pounds, my skin cleared up, I had energy, like my body was just craving that sort of fuel source and I wasn't giving it. And, my periods got better. So many different things improved just by that simple switch.
Yeah, it's always a tough one because I get it, man. Like I've said this before on the show. I have this dilemma in my head because I feel like I'm a normal guy in most other ways. But one thing I don't relate on is I would not at this moment want to like go out and hunt recreationally, even if I was using it completely, like, right. Making sure that you're honoring the animal to the best of your ability that you're able to while you're freaking hunting it. But like using the meat, using all that stuff, I can't get there. So I did the vegetarian thing for a while in an actual way. It wasn't like vegetarian crap food, right? I was eating overall healthy for a vegetarian, but it didn't work for me either. I needed those other things added in. But I also like that you recognized every diet's not for everyone. I think Weston A. Price figured this out almost 100 or over 100 years ago now, I realize, but I don't think people reference this enough. So Weston A. Price, for those that don't know, went around to all these indigenous tribes throughout the world and found that they really only had a couple of core things in common with their diet. They all ate animal products. That was one of the only things that all of them had in common, all the way from near the equator in Africa, all the way up to Nunavut, Canada. So that's kind of strange that was like the only thing that they had in common. And then outside of that, a lot of them ate animal organ meats. It wasn't even the muscle meats necessarily. In fact, many tribes, if they had dogs, fed the muscle meat to the dogs. Now, everyone concluded, of course, oh, well, this means that you're supposed to eat animals. This means that you're supposed to do this. I don't think anyone ever looked at the nuance of that. I'm not sure if you're familiar with the people who always post about like circadian biology and light and how it affects us. I'm sure you do since you wear the blue light blocking glasses.
Yeah.
I think that's the missing link with Weston A. Price's thing, because there was a couple key details there. When you go up to Nunavut, Canada, and you see what they were eating there, it was like 90% of it was animal protein, a lot of it from seal fat and whale blubber. And you're just like, how on earth are these people living such long and healthy lives? Because they were. But when you go to the equator, some of those tribes were eating as little as 20% of their calories from animal proteins and food in general. Some of them were actually classified as vegetarian. They were not eating necessarily any animal meat, but they might have cheeses or milk or whatever. And a lot of it was coming from carbs. So the conclusion was, oh, it must be just you need some animal products and that's fine. I actually don't think it's that. I think that when you live closer to the sun, or the equator rather, stronger sun, you're able to eat more carbohydrates and less animal products. And the farther you go away from that, I think generally speaking, our body adapts to need more animal proteins and fats. Now, the issue, of course, is none of us actually live outside today, right? Like, I don't know where you live, but I'm sure you're inside more often than not.
Yeah.
So I think we've needed to adjust, not even just for our genetic individual needs, but like from where we live. I don't know if you resonate with that. I'm not saying I'm right. That's just something I've come to over the years, that depending on even where I'm living at a given time, that might change how I eat personally.
Totally. Yeah. I mean, and there's also so much, about like eating seasonally. And I believe that 100%. I mean, in the summer when it's hot, I'm not going to make myself a stew, but
Yeah.
in the winter, I 100% am going to. I'm in New York, by the way. I'm in Brooklyn. So
Okay. Gotcha.
we get a lot of both.
Yes. Yeah. Well, and I'll add to it, and then I'll move on here, but I always love this stuff. It's like, so we know, you guys can look this up, fact check me on it. If you're exposed to UV light, so again, this requires you to actually be outside, what a concept, you become more insulin sensitive. So if that doesn't prove to some degree that, to your point, the seasonality might matter, I don't know what else would. Why would our bodies become more insulin sensitive in response to UV light, which, if they're strong UV, that's the same time that carb heavy crops would be growing. And I think that would make so much sense then with why these equatorial people were able to eat more carbohydrates year round, because they constantly have strong sun and the ability to grow things. So it's really cool. And I would do the vegetarian personally if I could. I can't do it right now. And it's overall working for me doing it the way that I am. So moving on a little bit here, I wanted to actually go to one of the points that you brought up to us off air in your notes about the iron deficiency thing, not necessarily even being about iron. So I'll just kind of jump into it right with that. Of course, if someone thinks that they have an iron deficiency, which a lot of people do, even if they're not into holistic health, they either knowingly or kind of believe that they have an iron deficiency. So why is it not always just about the iron, from what you've learned?
Yeah. So I think in general, like the medical approach, when we look at sort of like labs, right, and diagnostic labs in particular, at least in my experience, it was like, okay, your iron is trending down. Oh, now your iron, the full panel, by the way. Now you kind of meet the threshold for anemia, just take more iron. But we have to consider that iron is very, very complicated. There are a lot of different systems and cofactors at play when it comes to your body being able to utilize iron properly. So rather than kind of initially going to supplement with iron, there are plenty of people that might need iron still, but we need to really look at the foundations first and make sure that those are working properly so that your body can utilize iron. So there are a couple of physiological things. Number one, most people don't realize that the body actually recycles most of its iron. So it's less about how much intake you need, and it's more about when your kind of red blood cells reach the end of their cycle, or their life cycle, they get broken down in the liver and the spleen, and then that iron gets recycled in the bloodstream to make more iron. So right off the bat, just like pumping your body with more iron, it might not actually be that you're deficient. It might be that you have a recycling issue. I was eating plenty of iron-rich foods at that point, and I was still deficient. So I'm pretty sure that was part of the reason why. The other thing is weak digestion. So like if you don't have enzymes or HCl, as was in my case, or if you have leaky gut, you're going to have trouble absorbing your nutrients, and in particular iron. Then, iron is also a pro-oxidant. So if you have too much of it in there that's bio-unavailable and you're unable to use it, it's going to drive up stress. It's going to feed pathogens. Like pathogens love iron and they proliferate on iron. So a lot of the time, if you're actually just taking iron, you're making your dysbiosis even worse if you have something in there, and that can make you feel a lot worse. And then there are, of course, a lot of cofactors, minerals, vitamins that need to be in balance, that need to be, in your body at the right levels in order to utilize iron. So, when we look at these sort of foundations and we kind of like bolster the system to begin with, then you can sort of start to see those levels improve. At least I did. And then, yes, there may be, like I said, situations where you might actually need more iron, like if you, had a lot of blood loss or if you have very heavy periods. But in my opinion, that's not necessarily the first place to go to, especially if you've tried taking iron before and you really did not feel good taking it.
You mentioned in the first part of your answer how like we have to address the foundations first. So for it sounds like with who you work with, particularly the women out there that are dealing with this burnout, maybe they're just like you, right? Super ambitious, super driven, and they're getting to this point where they're starting to realize like, holy cow, I can't keep doing it this way anymore. What are the foundations for those people? Because yes, the work side is probably one part, but obviously now you're into this functional stuff. So when we say like we actually have to address the foundations and they're listening right now, what are all of those foundations that they actually have to do? I know some of it's going to be unique to the person, but generally speaking.
Yeah, I mean, it's so funny because it's not going to sound like rocket science, really. It's like, are you eating whole foods or are you just like grabbing a protein bar, breakfast bar in the morning? Like, are you setting up yourself with a good, nourishing breakfast in the beginning of the day to make sure that your energy levels are, good for the rest of it? Are you sleeping well? Are you really optimizing your sleep hygiene? Or are you just like looking at, are you always looking at screens, especially well into the night? Are you chewing your food thoroughly? Are you like really breaking it down and not diluting your stomach acid by drinking water at meal times? Are you moving your body? Are you getting sun? Are you getting sun on your body and on your face in the morning and throughout the day? Or are you just like stuck inside at a computer all day? Are you taking care of your mental and emotional health as well? It really does sound very simple, but like it's amazing how many people don't do these things.
Yeah, well, and I think if let's say they did it perfectly even for a day, I do think that they could have better sleep that night. I think they might even have a little more energy or pep in their step as far as early as the next morning. I do think that that can happen to people. The other problem is with these foundations, as conceptually simple as they are, it's not always simple in practice because you don't
Totally.
necessarily know, like, well, how long do I need to do this to get better? And what worked for me will be different for someone else. For one person, my gosh, depending on how sick they are, 30 days of doing the right thing, you could feel like your old self again. For others, it might be a couple of years, depending on how long this stuff has been going on or what else you've picked up along the way, figuratively, but also literally, if it's a pathogen or something like that, right? You literally could have picked up things along the way that could maybe delay the healing process fully a little bit. So I think that's kind of the issue, right? Is they hear these things, they want to do it. Maybe they're able to try one or two things at the time, and you don't get the results. And that can discourage a lot of people. That's why I wanted to go back to this because I'm very thankful that in your story, you still stayed open-minded enough to be like, all right, even after studying the herbalism, doing the health coaching, I'm going to do something like FDN because on paper, you were already doing a lot of things right. Like who the heck eats sprouted grains to your point, no one does that. So when we do those things and then we still don't feel like we should, it can become very discouraging for a lot of people. And they start to believe, oh, this natural stuff doesn't work. But it's like, there's misinformation, probably unintentionally, in a lot of the Western space. So let's say mostly unintentionally. And there's also some misinformation in the natural health space. I was told the same thing. Like, as long as my wheat was sprouted, organic, all that stuff, that's awesome. I have an immune response to gluten. My body does not care if that gluten came from the most organic wheat in the world or the crappiest wheat that's thrown into like standard bread. It doesn't matter. It's creating an immune response for me. So I guess like, it's getting these people to believe that if they actually do this long enough that they're going to get better. So I know that you can't say this perfectly for everyone, but what do you think is a realistic time frame? Like if someone was actually doing the foundations that you just recommended, even 80 to 85% of the week, right? So they're not doing it perfectly, but they're doing it 80, 85% of the week. I mean, I would say they should probably notice a decent difference within a month or two. Do you think that's generally fair to say?
I think so. But I think also, I mean, you brought up a great point about actually knowing like the labs really help with that, because the labs help us see, like, okay, for example, I also, like, I didn't know that I had an immune response to gluten or dairy. I was eating those things all the time, and like my sourcing was really great, but that wasn't compatible with my body. So even just by knowing that and cutting that out for a period of time to allow my immune response to come down, I noticed that I felt a lot better, or like knowing what's happening in your gut and working to resolve that and kind of like remove any sort of intruders, as I like to call them. That's going to also bolster your system. So I think it's like working on the foundations of like the lifestyle component, but then also the bio-individual stuff that shows up in your labs. And that kind of dictates the strategies for your nutrition and for your lifestyle, I would say.
Okay. I always got to put this disclaimer on, but like I can actually see trainees in the chat, so I don't want to confuse them. And they're just saying like thank you and excited to be here and stuff. But I don't want to confuse them in the chat. So guys, anytime we ask someone who's already graduated, of course you guys have access to more labs than just the foundational. So I like to see if there's anything else that they choose to use eventually or they're looking into. So I'll ask it this way: knowing what you know now, and this might change in 5 years, that's fine too. But knowing what you know currently today, if you could only like use like one or two of the labs for someone with burnout specifically, what two labs would you have in your back pocket always?
I don't love that question because I run more than two. No, it's okay. I'm a full picture kind of girl. If I had to only choose two, I mean, the GI map is foundational for me. I think so much comes back to like so much about just like if you're able to digest your food, and like our food is what we get energy from, right? So like so much of that is really important. So I would say the GI map is definitely up there for me, and like probably the one that's like my gold standard. But I run the GI map, I run the Dutch, the HTMA, the KBMO, and I look at blood work, blood panel for iron and thyroid. So like, that's kind of what I do to like look at the full picture.
What's KBMO for those who don't know?
KBMO, it's a food sensitivity test. It's food sensitivity, and also it has a leaky gut panel as well. So it's kind of like 2 in 1.
Nice. And I guess is that because you're in New York? Do you go to that one too? Okay.
Yeah. Yeah.
Hey, here's proof, guys, because they always like wonder. They're like, my gosh, there's no way that you guys can do stuff in New York and New Jersey and all these places.
It's possible, but I didn't want to say it, but you said it. So
no, and that's totally fine. We always want Mariana. The problem is a lot of people will get on like our workshops, and until they ask, they genuinely believe, oh, this isn't possible in my country, or this isn't possible in my state. And some countries and some states might take some mild modification, but we have FDNs in over 50 countries around the world, guys. Like you can do this in a lot of places, not every single country, but certainly you can do this all throughout the US. There's always an answer. And here's the thing. I would hope that anyone that's listened to even 3 of these podcasts has gotten this by now. The principles don't change. This is why I didn't ask her what different principles she applies now. That's not what we said. I said, what labs are your favorite or whatever, because that's typically par for the course. We might mess around with the labs a little bit. I'm not suggesting it, but it is fun, and I like looking at different labs too. The principles stay the same from FDN to FDN. There's certain things that we can't avoid, and that's why you even said those foundational recommendations, they're kind of simple. They're kind of straightforward. That does not change no matter who the FDN is, but we can always do different labs if need be. So what are you working on next? Like anything fun that you're studying? I know that our FDNs always love taking courses and looking into different like subtopics. So I'm just kind of curious, is there anyone that you're particularly fascinated with right now?
I mean, I'm really just like, it's funny. It's like, I've always been a learner. I always love to learn, but I've actually had to kind of, I felt like I was using that as an escape. I'm like, okay, I'm going to keep learning. There's so much to learn, and the AFDNP Facebook group is just like such a wealth of knowledge as well. It's the alumni group for when you graduate, which is great. But I actually had to kind of like pause on the learning, pause on the advanced courses, and really just like sit with what I know and what I want to kind of work on and bring to my clients. And so like, I'm really, really focused on the energy stuff. I just started learning about the vagus nerve and how that is all connected. That's like really like nervous system and, gut health and a lot of other things. So yeah, I'm trying to just kind of like focus and make sure that I really become the expert in what I want to, there's a fly flying around, in what I want to kind of bring to the world. And that's really like helping women get their life back and get their energy back. Like that's really what I'm after right now.
Awesome. And then we'll talk about who your ideal client is. So if anyone's listening, if it's not already clear, you would know if you want to reach out to her and work with her. But I have to ask this because this is not the first time I've heard it. So for someone like you, who was fully willing to go work insane hours, very dedicated to your craft and all that kind of stuff, I really appreciate your transparency in saying that learning almost became like maybe like a bit of a sidetrack from the business side or whatever it might be. And then I kind of wonder, it's like, is that because working for someone else generally brings this sense of stability? Learning kind of brings a sense of stability, but the entrepreneurship is very unpredictable. So am I resonating at all? Is there anything there that might have? Okay.
Yeah, 100%. I mean, that's why I pushed myself to do this podcast too. You know, it's like you can kind of sit behind a book all you want, and that kind of perpetuates this cycle of like procrastination, actually, because you're like, oh, well, what if I don't know enough? You know, and it's like, no, actually, you know a lot. Just like really sit with what you know and integrate that into your being and like work with that, as opposed to constantly trying to like stuff more stuff in your brain, you know?
Yes. And, you know, as health practitioners, I believe this even for doctors, if it's possible in their schedule, I think when we're in this health space, I've said this many times on the show, until we have the perfect answers for every single person that has a health issue, from cancers to skin issues to gut issues, mental health, autoimmune, whatever, I think we all have a duty to some degree to engage in lifelong learning. It doesn't need to be obsessive. It doesn't mean 100 hours a week, but just constantly checking ourselves and trying to stay up to date with the latest things. Why? Because again, no one has all the answers yet. Not even FDN, as great as we are. No one has all those answers yet. So that means we have to dedicate to learning more. But again, that doesn't have to be the distraction. And certainly you do not need to be the most world-class practitioner to help people. I think that's what individuals forget. As much as I love FDN, I'd say this pretty confidently. The reality is the health coaching programs that you and I did before this, we still knew more than 90% of people and still probably could have helped a lot. But when you go through something like FDN, there is no way you can't help 98% of people now. People just do not know the things that we're taking the time to study and learn about. So please don't doubt yourself. Learn, get a system like FDN if you need one. Go help people. Keep learning, but don't stop helping people just to keep learning. And we've all been there.
Yeah.
All right. So for those in the audience that are like, all right, she's pretty cool, I might want to work with her. I always like to give the guest an opportunity just to describe, like, what does your ideal client look like? So that can be from personality traits to background. I kind of already have an idea from things you've said today in your bio, but just so we're abundantly clear, describe a person who's like the dream client. So for anyone listening right now, they know to reach out to you.
Yeah, I think it's, so a lot of things kind of happen, I think, for women in our 30s, like our hormones start to kind of shift. And I think, so it's definitely a woman in her 30s, maybe early 40s, who has kind of like reached a breaking point. You know, she's just been chugging along, doing a lot of things. And then all of a sudden it's like you wake up and you just feel like you kind of can't do it anymore. Your brain, you know, you start having brain fog, you're just really exhausted. And you end up realizing that like you worked really hard to build like a dream life for yourself, but then you're just too exhausted to live it. Like that was really my reality. You know, it's like after work, I just would plop down on the couch and couch rot for hours. Like I couldn't be bothered to load the dishwasher, you know, like it's just this feeling of like bone deep tiredness, really. And I think unless you've really lived in that state, you kind of can't really understand what that's like, right? Because it's easy to just be like, oh, well, just grab a coffee, like that'll make you energized, but it goes beyond that. And then also, I think people that are just like frustrated with not getting answers from their doctors, you know, like, again, like I'm not trying to like poo-poo on Western medicine. It definitely has a time and a place, but I think when you're dealing with sort of like subclinical things or symptoms that don't have a clear diagnosis, like, you know, fatigue, like there's not just one test that a doctor can run to be like, here's your fatigue, you know? So I think, you know, if you have low iron, if you have anemia and you haven't like been able to kind of overcome that, if you have just sort of general energy or hormonal problems, like those are really the things that I specialize in.
Awesome. And I totally get what you mean. That in and of itself, I know we have some FDNs in training and probably some practitioners listening either right now or going to be listening in the future. A question that sometimes comes up because of like limiting beliefs is like, oh, well, who would want to work with me, right? I'm not a doctor, all those things. It's like, well, one, it's not a one or the other. They should always be, you know, having a doctor for some things, but also like you just said, you can't understand some of these things until you've been through it. I don't like that I can relate to this, but like with severe cystic acne at one point, it's pretty hard for people to understand what that's like, especially if they're a good looking individual. It's hard for them to understand what it's like to have that on your face for so many years and to be operating in the world like that. So yes, you might not be the most credentialed person that ever existed, but if you can relate to a human being, actually get what they've been through, and you've come on the other side of that journey, or at least you're, most of the way there, that's all that matters, guys. So I think that's how you can do this. With all that said, where can people find you if they'd like to reach out, work with you, ask a question, etc.?
Yeah, Instagram is kind of like my main jam right now. I'm trying to really, like I said, focus on one. So it's Instagram at Mariana Foley. So MarianaFol.EY. Regular Mariana Foley was taken, so I had to get creative.
I still have Evan Transu _, and if it makes you feel better, I stole it from myself and then I lost the password. So I'm literally the one who screwed myself over with that. All right, my friend, we're exactly 50 minutes in. So by the way, I see quite a few of you on, which is great. I'm glad that you guys are liking this. If we could just drop a thank you for our guests. They can't see how many people are on. They can't see you guys like I can. There's different settings for the host. So if you could just drop a thank you below, that would be great. But signature question for the show today. If we could give you a magic wand, you could wave it and you could get all of our viewers and listeners to do just one thing for their health. So this could mean that you get us all to start doing one thing, or you can get us all to stop doing one thing. What is the one thing you get us to do?
The one thing I get you to do is listen to your body's signals. I'm going to quickly give an anecdote of that. Sure. I used to be somebody that would I would either be hungry or I would need to go to the bathroom, like to pee. And I would just push through until I either finished a deadline or saw and made sure my mom was okay. And only then could I tend to those very basic, very visceral needs. Do not do that. Please stop doing that. It really signals a sense of unsafety and just puts you further into fight or flight because you're not listening to your body. And that is first and foremost who you have to take care of.
Awesome. My friend, I'm so glad to kind of see you on this other side here. I mean, nothing's ever perfect. My life's not perfect with all this, but I feel like I'm listening to this story and I think we're on the emergence of someone that's going to have a very large practice eventually. That's my opinion. And so I'm excited to see what another year, 2 and 3 years do for you and who you're able to help. We're just glad to have you in FDN.